So we've been talking about glaciers as part of a big global system and the way that different parts of that system are connected. I wanted now just to take a quick look at one case study, the Yukon River in Alaska, to illustrate what I've been talking about. If we zoom in here on the west coast of Alaska, you can see the Yukon River and here the Yukon River Delta. It's an amazing landscape and an amazing mega. We're talking about glaciers now, but if you were talking about fluvial systems or coastal systems, this would be a really good example to come back to for that as well. I'm going to try not to get distracted by the amazing fluvial features and also the amazing permafrost features that you can see in this area. But what I'm going to ask about is, why do we have a delta here in the first place? Is this entirely a fluvial question, or is there more to it than that? And the immediate answer as to why we have a delta here is the amount of sediment coming through this river and reaching the sea. The follow-up question then is, well, where does that sediment come from? Is it being derived, for example, from the local area, or is it coming from somewhere further afield? And we can explore that by zooming out and making our way gradually upstream. So I'm trying not to get distracted here by the amazing fluvial geomorphology. You can come back and have a look at that in more detail for yourself later if you want to. But I'm just going to zoom in now on a tiny little tributary which is coming in to join the main channel of the Yukon here at Ruby. And the reason I'm interested in this is because we asked whether the sediment was coming from local sources or or from sources further afield. And if you look here at the character of this river coming in as a tributary to the Yukon, it has much less sediment in it, giving it this darker appearance in the image compared with this lighter appearance of the very sediment rich, the heavily sediment loaded Yukon River. So we've got the first part of our answer, that all this sediment isn't just coming from every little tributary joining into the river all the way along its course, it's coming from somewhere else further upstream. So again, if we zoom out and make our way up the river, I have to make some decisions about which way to go, so let's just follow this tributary and see where we end up. Just to give you some context here. Just to give you some context here, we're coming past Fairbanks, Alaska, and heading up into the headwaters of the Yukon. What do we find? We find a glaciated environment, a glacial environment with lots of glaciers. Glaciers provide lots of sediment. They erode the substrate underneath them. They transport the debris from that substrate into the forefield and into the river systems. But in this case, not only do we have a glacial environment, we have an environment in which the glaciers are melting and retreating, in some cases catastrophically. So if we zoom in on these glacier margins, you can see the edges of the glaciers aren't characterized by glacier ice all the way to the front of the system. We're seeing a lot of dead ice buried in debris, buried in sediment, a lot of sediment being released into that proglacial environment. So it's partly to do with the characteristics of this glacial environment in the headwaters of the catchment that we can use to explain the characteristics of the river itself and the river system, and also to explain what's going on way downstream at the mouth of the river in the Yukon Delta. And you would anticipate that there will be signals in here, in the debris, the sediment deposited in this delta, that we could use to read what's been happening up in the glacial area through the course of history as different pulses of sediment have been sent through the system towards this delta. So that's just a little illustration of how different parts of the system are connected together. What you might initially think of as being a fluvial or coastal geomorphology component is actually very strongly connected to the glacial environment upstream and to the specific behaviours of the glaciers and the sediment system in that upstream area.